Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee today, and I'm so glad and so excited to welcome my colleague, Amanda Bhalla from Profit. Hi, Amanda. Good morning.
Hi, Charlene. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. You're so welcome. It's actually good afternoon because you're in New York. So
that is true. Yeah, right in that middle of the day. So
exactly. And so I'm so excited to talk to you today because you were one of the co-authors of a new report that Profit put out called Change Fitness, about Change Fitness. And I really wanted to welcome you to come to the stream because we've been talking about culture all month long. And what a better time to talk about culture change than with you and about this report. So I wanted to ask you, why did you write this report? Why did you think that there was a need to have a different approach to change management?
Sure. Well, so this is actually the third in a series of research reports that we've done. We call it our Catalyst series. And so every year we interview and we survey 500 plus leaders from around the globe. And it's always related to, whatever kind of timely and relevant topics we think are important when it comes to organization and culture. And so this year, obviously realizing the confluence of kind of major societal forces that happened over the past 18 months, we really wanted to dig into that and understand, what from leaders' perspective was going to be really durable when it comes to these forces of change moving forward. And then how can organizations really build their resilience and ultimately their change muscle. And so that's what led us to this idea of change fitness and really a more transformational approach to change management that's needed.
And so if you think about what was the key difference, can you go into a little bit about what the model was that you actually created?
Sure. So I guess just to start in terms of more traditional approaches to change management, when we looked at the environment, it's clear that it's going to continue to be dynamic. Companies are going to really need to rework their strategy, their culture. And so it's really important that, they are able to really build the agility to reinvent themselves in an age of disruption. And when we looked at the traditional change management playbooks, we felt that those, just weren't sufficient. So that, really views kind of change as an obstacle or a single milestone to be achieved. And you do it, check it off the box, we're done. And I think we know now we're never done. There's never a return back to normal. And that being said, many companies, especially those undergoing digital transformation, had certainly evolved their approach to change. So, recognizing change as more of a journey, something with multiple milestones along the way. And so that might be a more transitional approach to change management. So definitely there was progress, but we viewed, that's still not sufficient. And given, the technological forces that are still underway, as well as these major societal forces that we see continuing, that really requires a more transformational approach to change management. I'll share one other anecdote from the report related to those societal forces. So we dug into, if you think about everything that was happening in 2020 and definitely leading up to that, the increased interest and attention around obviously remote work, employee mental health and well-being, diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability. And we asked leaders, if you look out over the next 3 years, what do you expect to happen in terms of these forces and their importance to adapting your culture? And we found that for those 4 forces I just mentioned, more than half of leaders believe that those are going to increase in importance over the next 3 years. And so if you think about the really meaningful impact that they had in 2020, it's just another data point to say how dynamic the environment is likely to be going forward.
Yeah, some of the research we're doing right now at Altimeter, and I've seen from other places too, is that we thought we went through a huge amount of change over the past 18, 24 months. And leaders are expecting even more change over the next 2 years, which is crazy because we're thinking, well, when do we get a break? When do we actually get to go back to some sort of normal? I think we've all stopped saying what the new normal is going to be like because we just don't think that's going to happen.
That's right.
So what does this approach to transformational change management require? How do you actually do this? Because I think about, I do a lot of work around digital transformation, and it feels like it's in that middle one, that transitional journey part, because the transformation part's happening in digital. A lot of the digital transformation that's out there isn't really that transformational. We're replacing platforms, but things aren't really changing in the business. So give us an idea. How do you actually create transformational change? What's required?
Sure. Well, it's really about building that organizational muscle for change and this idea of change fitness. And, it's like any muscle, the more we practice and exercise it, the stronger it gets. And so we developed what we're calling our change fitness model at Profit to understand what does it look like? What is that training regimen to actually build your change fitness? So I have a few slides I'll bring up, which I think will be useful to understanding it. So.
Yeah, and this is while you're doing that, I just want to share that this is all based on a report that Amanda and other people wrote. So you can see that at bit.ly/change-fitness. Try to make it as simple as possible. Go to bit.ly and then go to change-fitness. All right, so let's take a look at some of these slides that you have that explains it.
Sure, and we'll go through the highlights today, but there's definitely more that's in the report. So at the highest level, that spectrum that I talked about before, from transactional to more transformational change management, you see that at the top, and we've identified 5 different levels of change fitness. And it's really all about moving from, change being seen as an obstacle, something we need to get past, to all the way on the right, change really being seen, more as play, like a sport. The challenge of change is exciting, and it creates opportunities to thrive. So if you dig into these a little bit deeper, so again, level 1, the key here is this is where change is really seen with a fixed mindset. New situations arise, they're perceived as a threat, and that creates some stress or anxiety for when things will get back to normal, as we talked about before. Level 2, this is where, change is a milestone that's celebrated. So there's definitely a more positive orientation, but still kind of this lingering desire to get back to the way things were. When we get to level 3, this is where change becomes exciting. And I think change fitness really begins to build at this level. And, these are companies who are looking out, seeing the path ahead toward transformation and feeling like it's going to lead to something better. So there's definitely the sense of growth and abundance. And then this is also where companies really begin taking more of a human-centered approach to transformation. And just to pause there in terms of what I mean by that, because that's really important to, our view at Profit in terms of looking at organization and culture. And so we view, organizations as a macrocosm of individuals. So therefore, like an individual, they have DNA, they have a mind, they have a body, and they have a soul. So DNA that really sets the direction of travel, a soul which ignites belief behind the change, mind which enables the capabilities for the change, and then body, which really directs the change and helps organize individuals. And so at level 3, we begin to see companies getting more intentional around each of these elements and really working with them in a more holistic way. Then we move to level 4, what we call flow. And this is really where the pace of change starts to quicken. Individuals move into kind of a flow state where their actions and their awareness of those actions are in sync, and they feel like they have real clarity on how to move forward. And then the 5th level, so congratulations, change fitness. This is where, organizations really thrive. They've embraced the growth mindset. And because of that, change is viewed as something ongoing, continuous, and really positive in a way that creates opportunities for individuals and organizations. And then within that, so you can tell there's lots more detail that sits in the middle of this in the report. But what I would say here is, there's imperatives for each level of the organization, leaders, teams, and then individual contributors. So this isn't something that just leaders need to worry about. This isn't something that can get pushed down to employees. This is something where really all parts of the organization need to be working in sync to advance change.
It's almost like from a fitness point of view, if you only worked your arms, you wouldn't be in great shape, right? You got to work those abs.
Right. That is right. It all works together. I have one more data point to share, which I think will be really interesting, which is how do we see the connection between change fitness and performance? And so as part of our survey, again, with about 500 leaders from across 4 countries, we asked them to respond to a battery of different questions, which ultimately rated them in terms of their change fitness. And then we also asked how they performed financially relative to expectations in 2020. And what you'll see is that companies with higher levels of change fitness, those at level 4 or level 5, also performed either at or better than expectations. And so, we see this emerging relationship between change fitness and better results, which can be really compelling when you're trying to make a case to senior leadership for greater investment behind culture and your change fitness.
Mm-hmm. I find these results around the connection between change fitness and financial performance so incredibly compelling, because if you had any doubt about whether it was worth the investment to develop change fitness, here it is. Here's the money. This is where it is.
We have called this the money slide. That is true.
The money slide. That's
we
great.
love this one.
So I would love for you to talk a little bit about how do we actually create and increase change fitness? I mean, what are the ways that organizations, and especially the leaders who are listening to this, what are the things, very concrete, pragmatic pieces of advice that you can give them to increase their change fitness?
Sure. So I'll offer 4 key steps, one at each of those different levels that we talked about. So starting with the organization, to really move to level 5, we think that that's about embracing experimentation and recognizing that, experiments have a flip side where they either succeed or they fail. And so certainly I think our prior research has shown that there's still, quite a bit of a stigma or fear of failure within organizations, and an unwillingness to really talk about it. And so a more structured approach is really important. We had a great story shared with us in one of our interviews with one of our financial services clients in the UK, who talked about, their belief that they weren't driving change forward in the way that they needed to. And so they brought in a behavioral psychologist to really help them understand what are the key mindsets and behaviors required to drive change. And they developed a program that they called Test, Learn, and Adapt. And what they did was they identified 40 different squads around the organization. Each one was focused on different perceived barriers to change. So something like policy approvals, for instance. And then they created a mechanism that they called a team talk, which provided all of the tools and the guidance that these leaders would need in order to structure experiments. But also it really helped to guide conversations and provide insights in terms of how to build psychological safety within the team so that, no matter the results of the experiment, there were lessons to be learned from it and we could talk about those openly. So then they structured from there. They had 20 of those teams as a test, or 20 as a test treatment and 20 as a control. And then they were set off to drive change. And so for the test group who received that mechanism, the team talk, they came back, they saw that they were more successful in terms of their ability to drive change. And they also saw a really unexpected outcome in terms of an improvement in the well-being of those employees who were on the team, how they reported their well-being, which as we think about now and that being a really critical topic, that seemed like a really important learning. So yeah, that's what we would say at the organization level.
I'm fascinated by this because I often hear this whole thing that, we have change fatigue. And what was happening with this team when they were changing, they weren't experiencing fatigue. If anything, they were getting energy injections from seeing that change happen. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, change fatigue. Actually, what's interesting is the term change fatigue is really what prompted us, 18 months ago when we started thinking about this research. That was one of the things that really wanted us to explore this topic because we were hearing about it quite a bit with our clients, and we wanted to really help them understand how can change not feel like such a burden or an obstacle and be something that is really energizing and positive. So hopefully this approach helps do that. From a leader standpoint, so that was the next level in the change fitness model. There we like this idea of giving away your Legos at Change 5. And it's a very literally colorful metaphor, but the idea there being the responsibility that leaders have and comfort in terms of giving it away. So, you hear this a lot in companies that are high growth and scaling where, when they're starting, they're wearing many different hats. They have all their different Legos to play with and, they can build anything they want. And as the organization grows and new employees come in, inevitably those employees start picking up some of the things perhaps those leaders have been working on with the intent to freeing up capacity. But sometimes there can be that territoriality or, uneasiness around this feeling of someone, coming in and doing the work that you already were doing. And so we think that there are some ways to get past that and kind of encourage leaders to give up their Legos, both kind of normalizing the emotions that come with that sort of high growth environment. It's okay to feel that stress and anxiety, and really painting the opportunity of the kind of bigger, shinier tower of Legos off to their right, and getting them to feel that by giving up their Legos, it actually creates more opportunities and more growth for the company overall. So
this feels so, I mean, I've talked to so many leaders. This is so difficult for them to do because they've been working this way for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years now of this command and control approach. So what are some ways that you have found that this works? I mean, I hear that you built scaffolding into the organization to help organizations figure out how to test and learn. Is there similar types of scaffolding you can build in that you find to be successful in helping leaders literally give away their Legos because they're holding on tight to it? They're not willing to share it, right? What are some approaches you think that works?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think, working in more agile ways can really be effective because, one of the other things that we've learned in our research is that organizations really struggle with pushing decision rights downward. And I feel like this kind of ties into that idea of giving away your Legos, because it's, that sense of control over the work you're doing, over the decisions that you're making. But we know when we're moving quickly and a lot of change is happening, it's just, infeasible for leaders to continue making all of the decisions. And so by beginning to structure teams in more agile ways, bringing in, more of those rituals, naturally through, self-organized and kind of empowered teams, that begins to push the decision rights downward. And I think frees up leaders to feel like they have more mental capacity to be able to look out ahead to what is new, what's different, and kind of reduce that desire to, hang on to what they have right now.
What strikes me is, and we look at all the different surveys, investment in leadership, development, and training is usually at the very bottom. And what you're saying is, these leaders need to be trained on how to work in more agile, more open ways. I have a question from Dr. M here. Just want to show this. Is this top-down approach, how does it affect middle management, the frontline supervisor and operator? You talked about pushing it down. How when people give away the Legos, what happens down the chain of command?
Yeah, well, it is, empowering and energizing for those down the chain. So I think that's almost a prerequisite for, individuals to really thrive. So, yes, it's coming from top down, but I think oftentimes that gives sort of the sense of command and control. And I think what's really important about change fitness is, it's not unidirectional. You need leaders pursuing change fitness. You need individual contributors pursuing change fitness. And, it's possible that different parts of the organization might progress at different paces. I think sometimes you see, a more natural orientation to change in certain pockets, and perhaps they begin kind of pulling others in the organization along. But ultimately, if that gap grows too wide, they're going to hit a wall. The organization really needs to kind of bring individuals along the journey, because otherwise there's this fear of being left behind. And similarly, individuals really need, the structure of the organization, really taking a deep look at the operating model, what are our governance, our processes, our systems, incentives, how do we align those around the change that we're looking to drive?
Yeah, so again, needs to be holistic in terms of this approach to change.
Absolutely.
You've gone through two of the key ways to increase fitness. You've done organization, you've done leaders. What are the next two? I want to make sure we get those in.
Yep, so for teams, so again, the agile ways of working, that's really important. And an aspect of that that, we tend to see at level 5 is really beginning to try out working in new types of cross-functional groups that are oriented around, particular breakthrough moments from a customer standpoint or in terms of purpose. So there's an example that I love from USAA, which, when they looked at the way that they were serving their customers in the financial space, especially around like these really critical life moments, things that have meaningful financial implications, like buying a house, they found that they actually were creating more work for their customers, making them go in multiple different places. And the reason why that was is because the different parts of the experience were being served up by different teams. So they weren't speaking to one another. And so they decided to re-architect their entire organization and really create these cross-functional teams that were oriented specifically around key life events for customers. So they created member experience units, and their particular role was to work with different product and service teams to integrate that into a cohesive experience for their customers. But importantly, it didn't stop there. So same thing, the decisions, the way that they made them really needed to change. So they created governance councils. They looked at their processes. They looked at their incentives. It was an incredibly holistic approach, and one that, therefore proved effective. So that's for teams, thinking about different ways of working in these cross-functional groups and really working outside in terms of customers' needs. And then the last one for individual contributors. So here we would say, it's really about building fluency in multiple disciplines. And I think there's both formal and informal ways to do that. So from a more formalized standpoint, definitely companies have, whether it's kind of structured rotations and more informal rotations, the ability for employees to move between roles. I love this example from Method, the home care cleaning products company, which I think allows employees to come up with their own titles and to change those in ways that really reflect kind of what's the value that I'm bringing to the team that I'm on right now. So those are some more formalized ways of doing it, but there's also great informal examples too. So different communities of practice, for instance, that it's kind of up to them when they meet, how they learn, how they share information. I think Spotify does a really good job at this. They have different chapters dedicated to certain disciplines and then guilds related to interests such as sustainability. So lots of different ways to kind of build fluency in multiple disciplines so that when opportunities arise, employees are ready to kind of move in, embrace that change, and help drive growth in those new areas.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think one of the benefits of verticals, of departments, again, is that you have a community of practice inside of marketing or sales. But when you're in an agile situation where everything's a cross-functional team, that potentially goes away. I think Spotify is a fantastic example. There's been lots of case studies written about how they use these communities of practice to replace the traditional vertical approach and to allow for advancements in knowledge and also in the career of people, but still maintain that cross-functional approach. So very matrix, really complex looking, but I think it really helps in that way. I know Dr. M had a question about this. Does this approach remove vertical functional divides, right? And have you seen that as people are increasing their change fitness? Are departments going away? How are they structuring the overall organization at higher levels of change?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen that departments are going away. Now, are they rethinking how to design in ways that, are more modern, are oriented around when they look ahead at their ambition and the capabilities that they need? I think the clarity that comes with change fitness really helps provide direction in terms of, do we need to, structure in a different way to really promote, protect and grow the capabilities that are important? Now, departments and functions still play a critical role in delivering against that, but it's more about designing it to get kind of the right people speaking to one another and breaking down those silos. And I think having that mindset around change, having the mechanisms in place makes that feel like a much more comfortable conversation versus hearing restructuring and feeling like no matter what, something bad is at the end of it. That's where it's seen as an obstacle versus this is an opportunity to really optimize, how we're organized and how we deliver for growth.
Yeah, we're always dreading that next, we know it's coming, the next organization and restructuring. And it's never a good thing. So it's interesting to see in level 5, people see it as an opportunity, as a good thing to happen, to right the things that aren't working. For people who know me and listen to the stream, they know I'm really big into measuring. So in the same way you can measure your fitness, like how many burpees you can do in a minute or whatever it is, right? How do you measure change fitness in an organization? What are some high level metrics people can look at to see, first of all, what level are they at, and also how are they advancing?
Yeah, so I think it's about translating change fitness into some core behaviors, observable behaviors that are really reflective of, the new ways of operating that truly build from change fitness, and then tying KPIs into those types of behaviors. And so, there might be instances where it's related to more of the cross-functional collaboration and measuring the extent to which that is happening. It might be leaders, certain competencies that are identified that really relate to the idea of giving up your Legos or tying that to a growth mindset. I mean, growth mindset is really critical at level 5. And, there's ways to build that into performance management to ensure that leaders are really developing that and also role modeling it for their teams.
And I have a question from Denise here. She's jumping in late, but it's a great question. Has this been applied to healthcare organizations, specifically hospital organizations?
That's a great question, and we did have, we do a lot of work within healthcare at Profit, and so it's always one of the primary industries that's represented within the report. And we actually are preparing to launch a healthcare-specific version of the report, a little bit more of a lean into pharma, but certainly aspects that I think will be beneficial across wherever you work in the healthcare ecosystem. And it actually was fascinating. I have to say that in the interviews that we did with healthcare organizations, perhaps more so than other industries, we really saw that as they were sort of self-rating themselves on the change fitness model, they were kind of all over the map. And I think we saw differences based on kind of what vertical they're in within the ecosystem. I think healthcare is, certainly experiencing, it was already experiencing a lot of change. The last year was definitely just, so monumental in terms of what those organizations went through, but also really heightened, I think, the urgency to build that resilience so that the next time, and I know there's a belief that this likely will not be our last pandemic, the next time that comes around, that organization is really well positioned to thrive. So we should be coming out with another report, I think in the next month or so, that hopefully provides some more healthcare specific insight.
That's great. And I have one other question from Dr. M. How is this different from merit-based appraisal and career growth? I'm not familiar with that necessarily, but maybe you are, Amanda. And if not, no problem, because it's very specific to, I think, what people are maybe looking for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say, the idea of kind of performance appraisal and career growth, certainly needs to fit its way in here, because no individual is going to be excited about the change to come unless they can tie that into the opportunities for themselves to grow and develop. But, this is all about change fitness in service of better business performance and more, satisfied, engaged employees. And so therefore, I think building more change fitness, both at the organization and the individual level, ultimately helps individuals perform better against their stated, personal objectives and goals, that I think ties really closely into the idea of merit. So hopefully that provides some helpful perspectives. I think the idea of performance management is one aspect of the broader change fitness model.
Great. Well, this has been super helpful. Just a lot of great examples, Amanda. So thank you so much. I just want to just put up the report again. You can download bit.ly/change-management fitness. So change fitness. And then you can also get in touch with Amanda. I know there have been some comments in here, but people wanted to stay in touch, wanted to get more information. So you can email Amanda at Bhalla, BHALLA @profit.com. She's on all the various social networks too, so you can connect with her there. And just to plug my stream for next week, again, Tuesday, 9 o'clock, this is where we usually are. We're going to be discussing the future of work is not about tech and what it really is about. So, Amanda, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all this great research and your knowledge and expertise.
This was fun. And, I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with all the comments in the chat, but it looks like there were lots of great thoughts. So definitely, as Charlene said, invite you to reach out to me. Would love to connect with you. And thank you, Charlene. This was fun.
All right, great. We have to do it again soon. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.